We have been discussing societal inequalities in our class, things like oppression on a systemic level of institutions, right? That it's seeped into the institutions themselves. We've looked at prejudice and discrimination. We've looked at structure and agency, right? The opportunities we have in society, the choices we have in society. When sometimes we have a lot of them, sometimes we don't. And so now another term that we're focusing on in a significant way is privilege. Maybe you've heard privilege being used in various contexts, but let's take a look at the definition. I will say now that second part of the definition, to me, in my estimation, is the far most important part and the part that has the biggest impact inadvertently. So we're talking about opportunities again, having resources and the things that you need. And in some cases, you benefit by virtue of your identities in ways that you wouldn't even think of because you have the benefit, right? So look at that second part of the definition. Those with privilege do not necessarily know that they have it, but there's still an advantage over those who don't have it. So let's look at an example of that. We're going to be doing an activity this week that has, I think, like 156 or something examples of various privileges that are a possibility. So here's the example that I have right now. These are actually flyers that students hung up. I believe it was around the University of San Francisco. And so they hung up flyers in all different kinds of areas, kind of talking about different things. For instance, San Francisco, lots of hills, right? At the top of the hill in the campus, they hung up uh, flyers that said, like, if you were able to navigate your body up to the top of this hill without having to worry about it, you have able-bodied privilege. Somebody who uses a wheelchair, that's going to be an entirely different challenge. Even at Cal State Long Beach, think about, what is it, like 8 flights of stairs, those little mini stairs. Now it is a little bit more accessible as they've done some construction as of late, but like trying to think about accessibility, even if somebody were to sprain an ankle and then to try to get from their car out to a classroom and all that type of stuff. The able-bodied privilege. If we're able to walk from one place to the other without having to think about it, we have able-bodied privilege. But this image that you have in front of you is in relation to restrooms. Cisgender privilege. Cisgender means if you fit into the binary, right? You are male bodied and identify as masculine, or female bodied and identify as feminine. That, remember, we only have those two choices in our society, that premise of it that keeps kind of impacting us all. And so that's how our bathrooms are divided in society, with that binary thinking in mind, that there's only two types of people. And if you are a person who fits into those two types, you don't have to worry about bathrooms. If you're an individual whose gender identity does not neatly fit into one of only two types, bathrooms become a place of stress, worry, fear, accessibility. Like, you have to think through, oh my goodness, wait, will there be a bathroom that I can use safely? If you can use bathrooms without having to think about it, that's cisgender privilege. Not everybody's comfortable with privilege. A lot of times it's really easy to get defensive. Oh, no, 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 that's not what I meant. Oh, like, oh, but I struggled. But wait a second. And yeah, everybody does struggle. Maybe you don't grow up with socioeconomic privilege of being in a middle class family, but maybe you do have cisgender privilege. Maybe you have citizenship privilege. Maybe you have neurotypical privilege where you're not struggling with any kind of mental health challenges. If you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. See, that's how privilege can work, that you don't even necessarily think about it. One of the other things that was, we kind of go through looking at privilege, and the privilege questions that are being answered this week, that's based on a sociologist, Peggy McIntosh. She wrote Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack of White Privilege. It's a very short piece, only about 4 pages. And in that piece, I think, is a list of about 26 things that she realized over several months of benefits that she had as a person who is white. And so that's what informs the questions that are being answered. In fact, the race questions come from Peggy McIntosh's work, and then other people have modeled questions after it. You might have also seen a few years ago, um, teachers, it would be on social media, classes doing what's called a privilege walk. And basically, it's kind of the same premise of these questions that you answer questions about resources, like, did you grow up in a house with, two bathrooms or something like that? And people would have to like step forward or step backwards based upon their answers. It kind of puts people in uncomfortable places because it's kind of on display. And so thinking through the fact that we're answering these questions by ourselves. But the other resource that we're taking a look at is called the Privilege Manifesto. And it's this very, 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 like half a sheet, short piece that shows us if you do have privileged identities, some things to consider as far as responsibilities to society as a larger whole. Some things to consider as far as the way that you act and or the way that you respect others and approach conversations that can be tricky. The fact that sometimes it's really important to listen. And sometimes it's actually really important to point out to somebody who shares a privileged identity with you that possibly what they're saying is problematic. It's not the responsibility of the person who's being oppressed to then try to convince the person who has a privilege, oh, no, no, wait. But think about it. Think about when you share an identity with somebody, whether it's race, whether it's gender, um, and they've said something that you're like, oh man, they're not even realizing the fact that they have access or they have this resource. And to be able to say, oh, maybe you didn't think of, those are the kinds of conversations that sociology can start that can make a really, really big difference. Hopefully by looking through the questions yourselves and seeing like the opportunities that you do have gives you a lot to think about, gives you a lot to consider, gives you a lot to realize and think about where's the fairness again. I go back to the critical thinking general standards. Where do we get our ideas? What are the things we didn't realize? Again, so many questions. Hopefully, by discussing and considering and exploring social inequalities and structure and agency and privilege, which are also very much linked, it again has given you a real moment. I said at the beginning of these three conversations that it's the heart and soul of society. Like it's our heart and soul of us understanding the lived experiences of others and stopping ourselves once again and go, wait a second, what might I have that somebody else doesn't? Where might somebody else struggle that I'm not? I truly, truly believe in the depth of my being that this is the kind of learning that can make such a difference to all of us. And I really continue to hope that you're finding that too.